Greetings and salutations, people of the internet. Austin here. Last time we took a brief break from the norm and did a tier list ranking the cross-gen evolutions for the first 10 regions I've showcased on the region so far. That video performed about as badly as I expected it to, so let's try and pick up the slack with this one. As I said last time, strange things are happening in the Zenya region. Someone has seemingly pissed off Osolaris. Something fierce and is throwing off the balance of life and death in the region. Long dead Pokemon are seemingly being plucked out of time and thrown into the present, causing chaos. It's up to you to locate the source of the damage and save the region. Along the way, you might as well capture some of the newly reintroduced Pokemon, if just to make your life a little bit easier. Without further ado, let's begin. Ryroot, the charging Pokemon. Like with my last Legends project, I like to use the starters from my regions, just to keep things simpler and make it a little bit more unique. Ironically, I had just finished the Curia Preserve reboot for this, so I didn't have to redraw any art for this little guy. I thought this made the most sense to be the grass starter for an African Legends project, so that just worked out fantastically for me timing-wise. I ended up making them from the Nasik region, just for some overlap between the two sister regions. I had a lot of fun doing the regional variants of the rest of the starters. Speaking of, Carthnu and Raistu, the Steelhorn Pokemon. I chose Grass Steel for this line since I thought that would give me the easiest transition typing-wise while still allowing me to keep the overall line intact. The idea for said line boils down to replace the rock armor with shiny steel, and I think I succeeded there. I changed the pose a bit for this variant, mainly just repositioning the head and the back leg, while flipping the canvas, obviously. I straightened out the horn so I had more reach in battle. I love the contrast with the dark brown skin and the greens of the rest of the body. This line gave me the hardest time when it came to the render for the texturing, but eventually I got it down. This is the second strongest middle stage design. Carthnu and Raistu, the Steel Spear Pokemon. I massively increased the amount of armor on this Pokemon, mainly on the head and underbelly. I made the rock, now steel, spike on the back a lot bigger, and gave it more of a curve for a more interesting silhouette between the two variants. I turned the end of the tail into more of a mace shape-wise. I kept the orange across the body to help break up the greens and just add some contrast to the overall palette, even if the orange is used a bit more sparingly. I actually think all three of the final evolutions are fairly even this time around, though some I do like more than others, but design-wise they're all pretty solid. Pyrodillo, the Fire Shell Pokemon. Thankfully, I didn't need to redraw this Pokemon since the Amalok reboot had been done for a while now, so that helped me out a lot. I chose this Pokemon since I thought I'd have the most fun giving it a regional variant, with a fun typing I don't do very often. I would say this is my personal favorite of the starters in this project. I especially had a lot of fun with the new shinies for the other two stages in this line. This would probably be my pick of starter if I had to choose. Carthnu and Cyferno, the Electric Claw Pokemon. My personal favorite of the middle stages, this Pokemon became Fire Electric since I wanted it to be a lot faster than their Emelopian counterparts. I brought the Pokemon down on all fours, making the front legs a lot bigger as well, and replaced the jets of flames with streaks of electricity on the back. I changed up the pattern on the shell, made the skin a light blue for more contrast, and I added more yellow to the design in place of the pink on the original. Super happy with this design. Carthnu and Armaheat, the Cannonball Pokemon. This design changed the most out of all of the starters during the entire design process. This was initially a lot closer to the OG Army Heat pose and proportion-wise, but I played it way too safe. I got a really good sketch and suggestion sent to me, mainly turning the shell and the end of the tail into rockets. This change gave the line so much more of a presence. The colors did take me a long time to balance out, mainly with that dark blue. That being said, though, this is easily my favorite of the final evolutions, and my pick of starter. I mean, how could I not? Craney, the Reckless Student Pokemon. This is the only starter I had to redraw the first stage for, being a massive head start on the Mihan reboot in a weird sense. When I was looking for my water starter choices, this one jumped out immediately. The redraw was fairly easy, only needing to repose the back foot. This line overall had the most difficult poses to pull off across all the starters, but you'll see what I mean in a second. Carthnu Kit Crane, the focused foul Pokemon. I based this line off of African rain dances, and I had a lot of fun looking for poses, even if they were a pain at times. I tried looking at traditional African clothing when designing this line, trying to figure out the best way to translate it naturally. The headband/hat took the longest time to iron out for this design. Went through a few passes to get it to look right. I think the outstretched leg might be a touch off perspective-wise, but not enough to ruin this design for me. Naturally, I had to give it Dancer for the hidden ability. I mean, it was just too perfect not to use for this line. Carthnu Geoninsis, the Rain Dancer Pokemon. This easily has the best silhouette of the final evolutions, thanks to the head feathers and the dynamic pose. The perspective of the feathers and the raised leg was the most difficult thing about this design process for me on this one. I added the raindrops on the wings to help give us some more visual flair and tie into the rain dance theme more than it would have otherwise. Plus, the design looked a tad barren without them, and I wanted to punch the design up. I thought minimizing the amount of red on this design compared to Kit Crane would make each stage a little bit more dynamic. I am looking forward to working on the classic Geoninsis down the line in the eventual Mihan reboot. Carthnu Spark Cub, the energetic Pokemon. I knew I wanted to do a good amount of regional variants for classic Zenyan Mons, and this is one of the first ones I locked down. I felt like I could have done more with this line in the first pass of the region. The Mega did help with that, but I wanted to spice the line up a little bit. So I made this Pokemon a bit more cocky and arrogant, while still getting bullied like actual cheetahs do. Or speedy kitties. I simplified the pattern on the body since the fur was a lot more detailed and I didn't want to overcomplicate the design. I gave this line Hot Shot from the Amalok region to play into the new personality, and I liked the ability and wanted to bring it back. A solid regional variant. Carthnu Chara, the Sandcoat Pokemon. Like its Zenyan counterpart, this evolves from Spark Hub once it reaches max speed in battle, and is our first ride Pokemon of the project, being the Weirdeer of this hypothetical game. Biggest change with this Pokemon is that this Pokemon isn't constantly tired all the time. I wanted to make this a fire ground type since I thought that would be a fun type combo and lead into the sandstorm motif of the Pokemon. The render on the dusty sections of the fur took a while to get to look right, taking a few attempts here and there. I added some elements from Mega Chara into the design, mainly with the back legs and the fur shape of the lower torso, kind of helped tie the two species together with a common design. The sand in their fur was one of the main reasons this Pokemon isn't an electric type, steadily changing over time as they quit using sandstorms as cover during hunting. This was a pretty good start to the ride Pokemon in my opinion. Rendep, the Tongue Lure Pokemon. Our first noble Pokemon and new evolution of the region. This is the evolved form of Dreadnought and is still based on snapping turtles, with their use of their tongues as fish lures. I knew I wanted to exaggerate the long neck and the tongue for this evolution. I'm low-key happy with how vicious this Pokemon looks, ready to snap off someone's hand if they get too close. Added the grass on the back of the head and shell to reference when it happens to snapping turtles in the wild, and I thought it broke up the silhouette pretty nicely. This off-brand dinosaur was really fun to work on, even if in some cases this probably looks more like a paradox Pokemon than a proper evolution. Boobok, the Shaman Guard Pokemon. The Climb Pokemon of the project, this is based on the extinct Blueback, aka the Blue Antelope. The first pass of this Pokemon was so bare bones. It lacked the pattern you see here as well as a boring pose. I detached the horns and the end of the tail to make it feel more ghosty, and just make for a better silhouette overall. I made the Pokemon be mid-jump for a better pose, something dynamic for a change. The second pass of this design is basically the final product you see here. I wanted to use more extinct animals for this project, this being one of many. Of the two Antelope Ride Pokemon I currently have, this is my favorite. I created Ghostly Chill to be the special attack version of Spectral Fire from Legends Cosme. What can I say? I just like giving ghost types fun signature abilities. Carthnu Orilla, the Bluff Charge Pokemon. The last regional variant of the project, something I didn't plan for, but just happened that way. Anywho, I wanted this ancient species of Orilla to be more aggressive. Or at least seem that way. I wanted to lean into gorillas acting tough to avoid conflict, especially with bluff charges. This line, with the exception of the final Evo, changed the least from their OG counterparts. I made the arms a tad longer and changed the shape of the gems across the body. I swapped some of the colors around, mainly changing the main body to blue, and this Pokemon was done. I wanted to make the shiny yellow since I don't do a whole lot of yellow shinies, and I think it looks pretty good when you get the right shade. You do not want to go full mustard. Carthnu Dimate, the Diamond Knuckle Pokemon. I made this Pokemon go to the gym since they're a lot bulkier than their Zenyan counterpart. I made the upper body a lot bigger, and I changed up the chest pattern, breaking up into two pieces here. I also made the feet bigger, something that will be changed with the OG version when I eventually reboot the Zenya Region. I simplified the brown shape, giving it a little bit more of a unique shape to it compared to the OG version. Naturally, the biggest change came with the pose, giving it that classic chest-beating look. I really like how this one came out. Simeon, the Crystal Armor Pokemon. I almost made this into a regional variant of Gorillamon, but I decided to go with a regional evolution so I could drastically play with the body proportions more. I went more Silverback Gorilla with the pose and proportions, wanting this Pokemon to be a tank. Kept the Psychic type to better lead into their future counterparts, and fighting Psychic is just a fun type combo for me. The legs gave me the biggest hurdle, mainly just in placement and size with this pose. I brought back Vegetarian for Prissoburn to play into the Silverback's traditional diet, and having an immunity is never a bad thing. I love this evolution. Easily one of my favorite regional evolutions. Dedepania, the Fragile Antenna Pokemon. One of the few non-noble or ride Pokemon in this project, this evolves from the Dene once it learns Thunderclap. I based it on African Spiny and Striped Mice. This went through a lot of changes, having to redesign it completely at one point. Then I had to repose the Pokemon twice to get it to what you see here. I knew I wanted to make this Pokemon primarily red to contrast the orange of Dedenne alongside the massive tail. The stripes were originally black, but I made them the orangish yellow you see here for color balance. The blue was one of the first colors I settled on, but I wanted to use it sparingly for the most impact. I did try having this Pokemon holding its tail at one point, but it just didn't pan out, so I had to scrap that idea. It gave me the most trouble out of every single design in this entire project. I'm glad I finally did this Pokemon, but god, it was a pain in the ass. Serpedo, the Dragon Shark Pokemon. Our Surf Pokemon of the project, and the only Convergent Pokemon here. This is based on the various Beta Sharpedo sprites over the years. This was going to be a regional Sharpedo at one point, but I decided it'd be more interesting as a Convergent species. So, I also made it a dragon. The main body of this Pokemon came from the anchor-tailed shark sprite you see here on the screen. I avoided a red color scheme for the design since I didn't want it to overlap too much with Thrift Swallow design-wise. I went with pink for the accent color since I thought it stood out the best against the dark blue of the main body. The mouth and fin perspective gave me some issues initially, but I eventually got them. I think this is my favorite shiny out of the lot in this project. I don't do white shinies often, but they're usually pretty good in my opinion. Glampuris, the Guardian Lion Pokemon. Our next noble Pokemon, this is the evolved form of Purugly when exposed to a combat stone, and is based off of the Egyptian goddesses Bastet and Sekhmet. This also was going to be a regional variant, but I thought an evolution would be more fun. I knew going into this that I wanted to keep the plumper aspect of Purugly's proportions, making it more unique compared to most of my feline Pokemon. The tail was a pain in the ass to get right. In terms of changes from the first pass, I moved the head decoration upwards to help break up the silhouette. I made the end of the tail bigger, and I added the cuts on the gold sections on the upper parts of the legs just to help make it a little bit more unique and not so uniform. At one point, I did try to keep the tail girdle, but it just looked awful. I'm glad I did this Pokemon. I haven't done anything with Purugly before, so this was a fun experience. Borvamore, the Trade Tunnel Pokemon. The would-be item finder of our project, i.e. the Ursaluna. This is the evolved form of Credent, based on Cape ground squirrels and tunnel boring machines. I had some issues with this one initially, not having a secondary concept behind the Cape squirrel. I didn't want to do drills again. I've been getting so bored of doing that. Someone suggested the tunnel boring machine and it just clicked. I wanted the challenge that the tunnel borer provided. The first pass was more or less close to the final design you see here, but I needed to make it thicker as it got closer to the head. I did go back and forth on the color scheme placement, mainly with the head overall, but I settled on what you see here. Let it be known, I don't care for Greedent as a Pokemon. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. So this was a fun chance to fix up what I don't like about that design without actually redesigning the Pokemon. Anuburial, the Underworld Pokemon. The ancestor of Lucario, I went full Anubis with our next noble Pokemon here. Like with Glampuris, this was originally going to be a regional variant, but I really love doing ancestor Pokemon, so I went in that direction. The first pass of this design sucked. It was too bulky in the upper body, the ears were too thick, and I didn't like the shape of the tail. Not to mention the pose was booty cheeks. The next pass was a lot better, slimming it down considerably. I did have to remove some bandages from the arms and turn them into the giant tail to break up the silhouette. Once that was done, the rest was easy. My favorite design detail is easily the onks on the forearms. That was tricky to pull off with the spike, but damn it, I love how it came out. Vinoliath, the Poison Moth Pokemon. Our final ride Pokemon and new evolution of the project. This is the evolved form of Venomoth once it's exposed to a sludge stone. I based it off of the African giant swallowtail, the most poisonous butterfly in Africa. Out of all of the new evolutions, this gave me the toughest time. The first pass felt more like a mega evolution than a proper evolution. After some advice, I added the antenna to break up the silhouette and make this feel more unique. I also did not know about the spots on the back of Venomoth's wing, so I added them back onto here. I did try giving this Pokemon a proboscis at one point, but it looked awful, so that had to get scrapped. After a few more minor updates, including adding the fur collar, this Pokemon was complete. This was a pretty fun evolution to work on altogether. Apenormous, the dragon bird Pokemon. Our final noble Pokemon. This is based on elephant birds. I wanted to do more extinct species for Pokemon without making them a fossil, and I already had ideas for the fossils of this project anyway, so I didn't want to do 3. I made it a dragon type just to do something different from the other rat type Fakemon I've done previously. The first pass was closer in design philosophy to the other rat types in my catalog and was a lot more aggressive looking. I wanted to change things up, so I made the thighs fatter, I changed the head shape, and I completely overhauled the feathers on the side of the body into the pseudo-scale pattern you see now. Said scale-like feathers were a lot of fun to work on, even if it took a few passes to get that looking right. This had black, soulless eyes at one point, but it just didn't work with the rest of the design, so I had to change them into the current shape you see here. Once I flipped the canvas and ironed out the kinks, it was good to go. I created molting as a signature ability to give something to this Pokemon a call its own, since I like to introduce a handful of new abilities in every DLC expansion. I brought back Footwork for the hit ability, since those who don't remember, Footwork is the kicking version of Iron Fist, and I thought this worked perfectly for this Pokemon's big old legs. Earth Atlas, the Rock Cub Pokemon. Our first fossil Pokemon, revived from the Paw fossil. This is based on the Atlas Bear and is the direct ancestor to Non-Dark from the Zenya region. This was a good warm-up from when I eventually redesigned Non-Dark in the future alongside the rest of the Zenya region. This didn't change all too much from the first draft. I already had an idea of what I wanted this Pokemon to look like. I almost made this Rock Dark, but I thought Rock Ice helped the type balance more overall. There isn't much more to say with this Pokemon. It's an alright design with a solid shiny. Boulder, the Atlas Bear Pokemon. If you're curious about the name, Dubu is the Swahili word for bear. I didn't struggle much with this Pokemon. I only really needed to flip the canvas and fix the minor perspective issues that popped up once I did so. I did the glow patterns on the forearms to keep the Atlas an Atlas bear without committing to the full Atlas theme. Take a shot every time I said the word Atlas there. Some minor color correction on the green was the only major hurdle when it came to the color schemes. Of the two fossil, this is my favorite, but I did play this one safer comparatively than its counterpart in hindsight. Yanmore, the Love Lizard Pokemon, our second fossil of the region. This is revived from the Heart fossil based on the, and bear with me here, Minyamatuka. I butchered the hell out of that. I'm just going to put it on screen here. The heart motif comes from part of the name of the species, Moyowamika, or Heart of the Tail, referencing some of the heart-shaped sections of the vertebrae discovered. When I learned that, this was immediately locked in as a fairy type. The pattern along the body is supposed to resemble rose petals dancing in the wind, further tying into the love/romance theme of the line. I added these scales late into production to help break up the empty space on the body, something I'm glad I did. This line is definitely the more ambitious of the two fossils and was a nice change of pace, however minor it may be. Adminimer, the Love Lizard Pokemon. Originally the pose had the neck and tail resembling half of a heart, tying into the soulmate/love theme I wanted specifically with this stage. However, it didn't read well after some feedback, so I changed the tail pose and the end of said tail. I added the rose at the end of the tail to look like an offered flower to their lover, and evolved the rose petal pattern from the previous stage, keeping it in theme. I cut down on the pattern to only the hearts along the legs, just to keep it from being overcrowded. I did redraw this Pokemon after a while since I didn't like the original face it had, changing it to what you see now. Didn't have any real issues during the coloring section of the design process, just adding blue to the pre-existing color scheme. Long Reach felt obvious for the primary ability, but I added Friend Guard since I just think it's a fun ability and tied into the companionship theme of this Pokemon that it's all about. Take a shot every time I said the word theme in this one. You'll die. Popo Brainois, the Hypno Wing Pokemon. The first member of our minor legendary trio, the Torment Trinity. This is based on the Popo Bawa, which actually had a typo I didn't realize until I was writing the script, which has thankfully been fixed now. Each of these Pokemon and the trio are assholes to their core, just a different variety, mind you. The biggest change to the design came in the form of a bigger forehead to feel more like a psychic type, and adding the black bands around the wings to break up the colors. Speaking of colors, outside of tweaking the saturation, I did have to change the wing pattern colors, since at one point it was just a Senegal flag and I just couldn't unsee it. So I replaced the yellow with the current pink you see with this design. This is probably the weakest design of the trio if I'm being honest. Spectibby, the Ghost Hound Pokemon, the second member of the Trinity. This is based on the Zenya. This changed the least out of the trio from their initial sketches, mainly just refining some of the shapes and adding the bracelet/manacles on the legs to break up the colors. I know I wanted this Pokemon to basically be a Hellhound more or less, which is more or less what the Zenya is if you boil it down to absolute simplicity. I love these spectral sections of the body, mainly the eye. I think that makes the silhouette super strong. This easily has the best shiny of the trio, not even close. I don't have a whole lot more to say with this one. It's just a simple concept done very well in my opinion. Quandround, the fake damsel Pokemon, the final member of the Trinity based on the Ashakondisha. This easily gave me the hardest time out of the trio. The first pass was awful. Way too human-like, and the pose wasn't pushed nearly enough. The face in particular needed a lot of work. I tried to have the hair/cloak become the arms for this Pokemon, but it never looked good, so I unfortunately had to scrap that idea. I made the Pokemon more goat-like in the face and hair after a sketch suggestion, which I had been struggling with prior. The water droplet shapes at the end of the braids were also their idea. I refused to wrongly steal credit for their brilliance. Once that was done, this Pokemon was good to go. I did briefly consider making the hair and cloak made out of actual water, but I felt like it'd be too much. I'm glad I added these three. I don't do enough sub-legendary Pokemon. This Stormer, Dynasty form, the Storm King Pokemon. You knew these were coming. I can't do a Legends project without giving the Legendaries a new form. I really wanted to play into the Sandstorm aspect of this Pokemon's lore, and just because I don't draw Sandstorms often and wanted to practice. Outside of simplifying the Dust Devils on the legs and tail, the biggest hurdle came with the colors. The purple on the OG design kept blending in saturation-wise, so at one point I made it into a bright magenta, but that didn't work out too well, so I changed it to the darker color you see here. Moving around the colors took a while, but I really like how this Pokemon came out. It did change the least out of the trio, though, I gotta be honest there. Skyveilus, Dynasty form, the Celestial Eye Pokemon. This is my personal favorite of the new forms, easily being the biggest glow-up for this Pokemon. I leaned into the eye motif of Horus and had each wing being an eyeball, with the sun and moon acting as the pupil. I covered the face and the mask with a partial eclipse on the forehead to represent both celestial bodies, and I thought it just made for a more kick-ass design. I made the hair and tail feathers a lot bigger for a better silhouette and to show off the form change better. The moon and sun took a good amount of time in the rendering process to get right, mainly the sun. I love everything about this form. This easily redeems Skyveilus in my eyes. It was the weakest designed Pokemon of the Zenya Legendaries, easily, and this is a complete 180 in that regard. If I had to choose a version just for this Pokemon, I would. Osolrus, Dynasty form, the Underworld Pokemon. I initially tried this one first when I was doing the legendary form since I had a vague idea at the time, But it didn't work out, so I took a break and worked on the Stormer and Skyveilus before coming back to this one in the end. I wanted this Pokemon's floating body to allude to the legend of Osiris being cut into many pieces by Set before eventually being brought back together wrapped in bandages. I gave it more of a lower body, and I changed up the belt and sash with the flowing ends in front. I reworked the face pattern, mainly just combining the purple around the eyes to be a full face mask, more or less. I opened up the chest and had the bandages resemble a loose rib cage, and made them more obvious as the crook and flail, two of his main symbols in mythology. The colors took a bit of an effort to balance out, mainly the gold, but I'm overall happy with the design. I feel like I probably could have done more with a form change, but this is an improvement in my eyes. And with that, Legends Carthnu has come to an end. It does feel a bit weird doing the DLC for a region I haven't remade yet, but it never hurts to mix things up. I had a lot of fun with this project. I already have my next Legends project lined up in the future. We're going to be taking a break in July for my birthday, and so I have more time to work on my next big video, and hopefully the start of something new on the channel. Like and subscribe to stay up to date for when that video comes out. Hit the bell so you don't miss on any new uploads. Down below, let me know what your favorite new Pokemon was, and if your Zenya Region team changed with these in mind. Next time, we head back to the Kyria Preserve to check out all of the new additions. See y'all in August. This is Austin signing out.